Okay, so this is going to be just a brief introduction to argument. For most of you, this is probably going to be a review, and that's okay. I just want to make sure that we're sort of all on the same page before we start your first major assignment for the course. Writing in college is different. It's going to mean some different things from one course to another because of the discourse communities that we participate in. And discourse communities are communities linked together by a common sort of language. For instance, the sciences have terminology and vocabulary that only they use, and so any writing that takes place in that discourse, they're expected to use the language that's appropriate for that community. And so, there are a number of expectations that we're going to talk about because we need to understand the consistent ones, the ones that appear in all of the disciplines, regardless of any differences. For instance, these are the things that should be taking place in my class, an English class, but also a science class or any writing that you're doing in speech or a marketing class. These kinds of things are consistent among the various disciplines. The first thing that you need to understand is that readers of college writing expect to learn something new. They don't want to see something or read something that they already know about. And so, one of the major questions that we ask when we're doing things like analysis is so what? Um, a more blunt approach to that is who cares? So, your goal is to produce something new. Do you have a different perspective? How can your voice contribute to an ongoing debate or investigation? Now, the nice part about English 222 is that we're actually going to spend 16 weeks developing the voice that you have to contribute to an ongoing debate or investigation. The entire objective and the purpose of the course is for you to add your voice to an ongoing conversation in your discipline. So, the next thing that you have to examine is the purpose. Is this reflective? Is it informative? Is it persuasive? Or is it entertaining? The kind of writing that's being done determines the kind of tone and the presentation that the message needs to take. You're not going to see a sports drink advertisement taking place in a field of flowers. That's more appropriate for something like a perfume ad or maybe a makeup ad, something softer, prettier. So the kinds of purposes that a writing has, that a message has, definitely determines the tone and the presentation. So this is where we get into rhetoric. This is probably something that you've heard of before. I know that we definitely cover it at mid in our 110 and 111 classes. Basically, Aristotle, someone I'm sure you've heard of, has determined that there are three essential components of communication. And those components are ethos, pathos, and logos. They contribute to what we call the rhetorical triangle. We refer to ethos, logos, and pathos in a triangle because there needs to be a balance of the three components in any kind of communication that's taking place. What's important is that the balance is appropriate for the discipline that's happening. Ethos attributes itself to the trustworthiness. How knowledgeable, how credible does the author appear to be? Pathos is connected to the emotions and the values of the audience. So, what is the author trying to do to elicit specific kinds of emotions, and what kinds of values does the author seem to assume that the audience has? Logos is probably one of the easiest ones to locate in a piece of writing or in an advertisement because it's the logic, the reasoning, and the evidence. Things like data, graphs, charts, photographs, things that easily seem to add up that can be logically reasoned, those are logos. So, the major part of analyzing the rhetoric of any kind of message is to understand that writing doesn't exist in a vacuum. Um, it's not something that just happens and only happens in one specific area. You can't say, for instance, that something is categorically good or bad. A particular form of writing you can't just say that it's not direct enough. You need to consider the purpose and the rhetorical context. What was this author hoping to achieve? Who was the audience? How did he craft this specific sort of appeal to that audience? Questioning the use of rhetoric should also happen in your own writing. You should be asking similar questions about the things that you're doing, especially in English. What's my purpose? Who is my audience? How should I craft this piece so that it achieves my purpose in this particular context? These aren't foolproof. Aristotle, the most important part of his message is that these are just the primary means of making an argument. It's not guaranteed. It's not a foolproof solution. And we need to continue to ask questions of ourselves as we're reading things. The other thing to understand about Aristotle's message is that no single appeal is considered the most important, and there's no one mixture of these appeals that's always going to be best. An argument's persuasiveness isn't determined solely by the claims and the reasons that he or she uses to support those claims. The person making the argument is also important. Does this person seem credible? Is the audience already familiar with this person? Think about things like why companies try to sign athletes like Michael Jordan or Serena Williams, Kobe Bryant, to endorse sports-related kinds of things. Why do other companies have them endorse non-sports related things? We rely heavily then on their credibility to determine the effectiveness of the message. The other part that we need to consider is that cooperation between these elements is key. Ask yourself things like, how do the rhetorical elements work together? How do these elements work together to successfully fulfill the author's purpose? Where and why do these elements work unsuccessfully?